The most dangerous deal in New Orleans was not made in a back room, or beneath a bridge, or behind the locked doors of a warehouse by the river. It began under crystal chandeliers, between champagne towers and silk masks, while the city's richest families smiled for cameras and pretended they did not smell blood beneath the perfume. On the night of the Saint Aurelia Masquerade, every secret in the Gulf South put on diamonds and came to dance. Judges shook hands with smugglers, politicians laughed with men who owned bodies buried under swamp water, cartel envoys lifted glasses beside charity donors, and in the shadow of it all stood Mara Bellucci, the daughter nobody wanted, wearing plum velvet and trying very hard to disappear. The Bellefontaine Hotel glowed, like something pulled out of an old dream. Its white stone walls rose over the French Quarter with quiet pride, its balconies trimmed in black iron, its windows burning gold against the soft New Orleans night. Inside, the ballroom smelled of roses, expensive liquor, candle wax and rain. A jazz trio played near the far wall, slow and smooth, the kind of music that made bad men feel elegant. Above the crowd, painted angels watched from the ceiling, their faces calm and lovely, as if they had not seen the same room used for threats, bribes and quiet promises no honest person would ever survive. Mara knew better than to trust beauty. She had been raised inside it. The Bellucci family built their public name on polished things. Hotels, jazz clubs, riverfront restaurants where tourists paid too much for oysters, and old men in linen suits spoke softly over private accounts. To the city, Vittorio Bellucci was a generous businessman, a charming old money patron who donated to children's charities and hurricane relief funds. To the underworld, he was a man whose hands were deep in the Mississippi, controlling the barges that moved goods through the dark, bribing the officials who looked away, and turning dirty cash clean beneath the soft glow of hospitality. But Vittorio was not the reason the Bellucci empire still breathed. Mara was. She stood near a marble column at the edge of the ballroom, her mask hiding only part of her face, and watched the room the way other women watched mirrors. Quietly, carefully, without mercy. She saw the state senator who kept tugging at his cuff because he had just noticed a cartel man near the auction table. She saw the judge who refused to look at Vittorio, even though his campaign money had passed through Bellucci accounts twice in the last year. She saw the river captain standing too close to a customs director, both of them laughing too loudly. Every room had a map if a person knew how to read it. Every glance was a route. Every handshake was a transfer. Every silence was a warning. That was what Mara did. She saw movement before anyone else understood danger was coming. For years, she had managed the hidden bones of her father's world, shipping manifests, port schedules, customs papers, inventory codes that looked harmless to anyone who did not know where to search. She knew which barges carried legal goods and which ones carried things that made men rich enough to buy judges. She knew which officers had been paid, which clerks were afraid, which warehouses had cameras pointed the wrong way on purpose. Vittorio took the credit, because men like Vittorio believed power belonged to the loudest voice in the room. Mara gave him the system, the routes, the clean documents, the false trails, and he gave her silence in return. Not gratitude, never gratitude. To him, Mara was an inconvenience wrapped in a body he considered embarrassing. 27 years old, soft, heavy, quiet, and far too clever for a family that preferred women decorative. He hated that she could not be easily displayed. He hated that she did not glitter on command. He hated the way her presence made him remember that not every daughter could be traded like a polished jewel. Bianca, though, Bianca was exactly what Vittorio wanted the world to see. Mara's younger sister floated across the ballroom in a silver silk gown that caught the light with every graceful step. Her jeweled mask spread around her eyes like butterfly wings, delicate and shining. Men turned to watch her, women watched too, but with sharper mouths. Bianca had been trained since childhood to be admired. She knew how to tilt her chin, how to laugh without wrinkling her nose, how to make powerful men feel chosen when she had done nothing but look in their direction. Vittorio loved that about her. He paraded Bianca through parties as if she were proof that the Bellucci bloodline had not softened, had not failed, had not produced Mara first. Before they left the house that evening, Bianca had smiled at Mara's dress with the sweet cruelty of a blade wrapped in ribbon. She had said plum velvet was brave for a woman who should be careful about drawing attention. She had told Mara to stay near the walls and not wander into anyone important. Vittorio had not corrected her. He had only adjusted his cufflinks and warned Mara not to create a scene. Mara had said nothing. Silence had always been safer than hope. Still, when she had looked at herself in the mirror before leaving, she had felt something small and fragile move in her chest. The dress had been her choice, not Bianca's, not her father's. Deep plum velvet, soft against her skin, cut to follow her body instead of hiding it like a crime. It did not make her thin. Nothing could, and some exhausted part of Mara no longer wanted to be. It made her look like herself, only richer, steadier, touched by candlelight. For one dangerous second, she had wondered what it might feel like to enter a room and not apologize for the space she took. The ballroom reminded her quickly. Eyes passed over her, then returned with judgment. Some were subtle, some were not. A woman in pearls glanced at Mara's hips and whispered behind her fan. A young man near the champagne table looked her up and down with a smirk, then turned away as if he had decided she was furniture. Mara felt each look like a small stone placed inside her chest, familiar but still heavy. She tucked herself closer to the marble column and focused on the crowd. That was when the room changed. It happened before the doors opened. Mara felt it first in the sudden tightening of voices, then in the way two men near the auction platform straightened their backs. Then in the way Vittorio stopped speaking mid-sentence and turned toward the entrance with the bright, hungry look of a man who smelled rescue. The double doors opened, and Dante Moretti walked into the Saint Aurelia Masquerade. He wore a black tuxedo with no flash, no decoration, no desperate shine. His mask was plain black, shaped close to his face, making his calm feel colder. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and controlled in a way that made the room seem nervous around him. His men entered behind him and spread without being told, taking corners, doors, sightlines. They did not shove, they did not speak. They simply appeared where danger would have stood if danger had bothered to dress well. Mara had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. Dante Moretti had inherited his empire after his uncle was murdered, and most men expected him to spend his first months fighting to keep it. Instead, he had taken back stolen territory in weeks, broken 3 rival crews, and made betrayal feel like a bad investment. He was not loud like her father. He did not need noise. The room bent around him, because everyone inside it understood one simple truth. Dante did not threaten often, because when he did, the threat was already becoming history. Vittorio's hand found Bianca's elbow. He pushed her forward with a whisper Mara could not hear, but could easily guess. Smile. Be charming. Be chosen. The plan was almost insulting in its simplicity. Vittorio had come to the masquerade to buy protection with beauty. He needed Dante's strength, Dante's roots, Dante's name. And because Vittorio had never understood value unless it came wrapped in silk, he was ready to offer Bianca like tribute. Bianca moved with perfect confidence, drifting toward the auction platform where Dante would have to pass. She smiled behind her butterfly mask, bright and practiced. Several people noticed. Vittorio noticed. Even Mara noticed, though she wished she had not, because watching Bianca work a room was like watching the world confirm every cruel lesson their father had ever taught them. Mara stepped back, hoping to become part of the wall. Her heel caught the edge of a rug. It was such a small thing, almost nothing. A shift of weight, a soft stumble. Her shoulder brushed a waiter, carrying a silver tray of champagne. The tray tipped. Crystal chimed sharply. One glass slid, spun, and spilled a pale splash across the floor near Bianca's gown. It barely touched the hem, hardly enough to matter. Bianca turned as if Mara had dragged her through mud. The music seemed to soften, or maybe Mara's body simply stopped hearing it. Bianca lifted the edge of her dress, stared at the tiny wet mark, and then looked at Mara with the kind of satisfaction that made Mara's stomach drop. It was not anger in her sister's eyes. It was opportunity. "Of course," Bianca said, her voice sweet enough to carry. "You cannot even stand in a ballroom without ruining something." Mara's face burned behind her mask. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "You never mean to," Bianca said, cutting her off. "That is the problem. You just move through the world like everyone else should make room for you." A few people turned, then more. Vittorio's face tightened, but he did not step forward. He looked away, furious not because his daughter was being humiliated, but because the wrong daughter had become visible. Mara felt the old shame rise, thick and choking. She knew this part. The room would pretend not to listen, while listening to every word. Bianca would smile with tears in her voice and knives in her hands. Their father would let it happen, then later blame Mara for making the family uncomfortable. Bianca took one step closer. Her silver gown shimmered like moonlight. "You were told to stay near the wall," she said softly. "That was not difficult. You just had to stand still and not embarrass us. But even that is too much for you." Mara swallowed, eyes stinging. "Bianca, please." The word please only made Bianca smile wider. "You do not belong in rooms like this," she said. "You know that, don't you? Men like Dante Moretti do not look at women like you unless they need somewhere to hide a body." The silence that followed was terrible. It moved through the ballroom like cold water. Mara felt it touch every part of her, her skin, her throat, the soft curve of her stomach beneath the velvet, her hands, which had built more secret roots than any man in that room could name, the mind that kept her father alive, the heart that still, stupidly, wanted someone to say enough. No one did. Mara stepped back, one hand gripping her small clutch. She wanted to leave. She wanted the marble floor to open under her feet and swallow her into the old bones of the hotel. She wanted, more than anything, not to cry where they could see. Then a man's voice cut through the silence. "You are in my way." Bianca turned at once, her expression shifting so fast it almost looked magical. Hurt became charm. Cruelty became sweetness. She faced Dante Moretti with a soft laugh, ready to turn the humiliation into flirtation, ready to make even this moment serve her. "Mr. Moretti," she said, dipping her chin, "I was hoping we might finally be introduced." Dante did not look at her. His gaze moved past the silver dress, past the jeweled mask, past the perfect daughter Vittorio had placed in his path like an offering. It landed on Mara, and stayed there. Mara forgot how to breathe. Dante walked around Bianca as if she were a chair left too close to the aisle. The movement was small, but the insult was enormous. Whispers rose instantly, soft and hungry. Bianca froze with her mouth slightly open. Vittorio's face went pale with confusion. Mara stood trapped by the marble column, unable to run, unable to disappear, while the most feared man in the Gulf South crossed the room toward her. He stopped close enough that she could see his eyes behind the mask. Dark, steady, not kind exactly. Kindness was too soft a word for a man like him, but focused, clear. He looked at her as if he had come to the masquerade not to make a deal, not to choose a bride, not to be entertained, but to confirm a suspicion. Mara braced herself for pity, or mockery, or some polished version of both. Instead, Dante removed his mask. The whole ballroom seemed to hold its breath. "I know who you are," he said. Mara's fingers tightened around her clutch. "I doubt that." A faint curve touched his mouth, not quite a smile. "You are Mara Bellucci." Her stomach sank. Of course. That was all she was to men like him. Vittorio's unwanted daughter, Bianca's heavier shadow, the thing the Belluccis tried not to introduce unless someone had already noticed. But Dante continued, his voice low enough for her yet clear enough for the nearby crowd to hear. You are the woman who rebuilt the Bellucci river system so cleanly that every syndicate from here to Houston has been trying to copy it for 2 years. Mara went still. The shame in her chest changed shape. It became fear. Dante knew. He knew about the routes, the coded manifests, the false cargo trails, the port schedules that looked ordinary until they moved millions of dollars in silence. He knew the secret her father had buried under parties and lies. If Dante knew that much, he could ruin the Belluccis before sunrise. He could ruin her. He could take the system apart piece by piece and leave her family bleeding in the street. But he did not look angry. He looked impressed. Behind him, Bianca made a small sound, sharp and disbelieving. Vittorio stepped forward at last, his old charm cracking around the edges. Mr. Moretti, there must be some misunderstanding. Mara assists with paperwork. My younger daughter Bianca is the one I intended for you to meet. Dante did not turn around. I am sure she is. The answer was quiet. It was also final. The auction host, nervous and sweating beneath a gold mask, stepped onto the small platform near the orchestra and announced the ceremonial first dance. It was an old tradition of the Saint Aurelia Masquerade. One of the evening's major donors would bid for the honor, the money would go to charity, and the chosen dance partner would become the subject of every whisper in the room. Bianca straightened again, wounded pride fighting for survival. This, at least, she understood. A public dance, a chance to recover, a chance to make the room remember who was supposed to be admired. The host called for bids. Dante raised his hand. The number he gave was so high, the ballroom gasped. Then he looked at Mara and offered his hand. No, Mara whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes softened, but only slightly. No, I cannot dance with you. You can. Everyone is staring. Let them. The words were simple. No comfort, no apology, just command, calm and absolute. Mara looked at his hand, then at the room, waiting to watch her fail. Bianca's fury burned hot enough to feel against her skin. Vittorio stared, as if Mara had become a problem he could not calculate. Every instinct Mara had told her to retreat, to lower her head, to return to the wall where unwanted things belonged. But Dante did not lower his hand. And something in Mara, some tired, buried thing that had spent years being quiet so other people could feel large, reached back. She placed her hand in his. Dante led her to the center of the ballroom. The music changed into something slow, dark, and old. Mara felt the size of herself with every step, the weight of her body, the velvet against her hips, the heat in her cheeks. She expected Dante to hold her carefully, as if her softness were a problem to manage. Instead, his hand settled firm at her waist, steady and sure. He did not create distance. He did not guide her like an apology. He held her like he had chosen her in front of a room full of enemies, and meant every second of it. Mara's breath trembled. Why are you doing this? Dante moved with controlled grace, turning her away from Bianca's glare. Because your father tried to offer me a pretty distraction. And you prefer humiliation? I prefer truth. Mara looked up at him. The chandeliers painted gold along his cheekbones. You do not know me. I know enough to be curious. That is dangerous. His mouth almost smiled. So are you. The words moved through her slowly, like warmth through frozen hands. Dangerous. No one had ever called her that. Too large, too quiet, too awkward, too difficult, too much. Never dangerous, never valuable, never the thing in the room worth fearing. Dante's voice dropped lower. Beauty can decorate a table, Mara. It cannot keep a kingdom alive. Her throat tightened. He turned her again, and for one strange, impossible moment, the ballroom disappeared. There was only the music, the warmth of his hand, and the way he looked at her, as if every hidden part of her had already stepped into the light. Mara did not know whether she wanted to run from it or lean closer. When the dance ended, no one clapped at first. They were too shocked. Then applause began in scattered bursts, polite and uncertain, until it filled the room with a sound that felt less like celebration and more like surrender. Vittorio reached them before Mara could pull her hand free. His smile was tight, his eyes hard. "A lovely gesture, Mr. Moretti, but I am afraid you have mistaken my daughter's role. Bianca is prepared for the kind of alliance you require. Mara is not suited for public life." Dante finally looked at him. The temperature seemed to drop. "You displayed the box," Dante said quietly. "You hid the crown." Vittorio's mouth opened, but no answer came. Dante turned back to Mara. "Come with me." The room tilted beneath her. Where? Away from here. Mara should have refused. She knew that. She should have remembered who he was, what happened to women who stepped into cars with men powerful enough to erase roads behind them. But behind Dante stood the ballroom, her father's cold disappointment, Bianca's burning hatred, and a life spent building an empire from the shadows while being treated like a family shame. So when Dante Moretti offered his arm, Mara Bellucci took it. The whispers followed them all the way out of the Bellefontaine Hotel. Outside, the New Orleans night waited warm and wet, smelling of rain, river water, and distant magnolia. Dante's armored car idled at the curb, black and silent. His driver opened the door. Mara paused before getting in, one hand against the frame, her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. "This feels like an abduction," she said. Dante stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder blocked the view of the hotel doors. "No, this is a rescue." Mara looked back once. Through the glass, she could see Bianca standing beneath the chandeliers, silver and furious, with Vittorio beside her, like a man watching a ship leave without him. Mara slid into the car. Dante joined her, and the door closed with a heavy sound that sealed them inside dark leather and quiet power. As the car pulled away from the Bellefontaine, Mara folded her hands in her lap to hide their shaking. She told herself she was afraid because Dante knew her secrets, because he could destroy her family, because powerful men never offered safety without asking for blood in return. Dante reached beside him and placed a file on the seat between them. Mara stared at it. "What is that?" "The truth about your father." Her chest tightened. Dante opened the file, revealing copies of documents, transfer records, river maps, and signatures that made the world inside Mara go cold. She saw routes she had designed, routes Vittorio had no right to sell, routes connected to Moretti protection, routes promised to men who would kill over less. "Your father betrayed me," Dante said. "He sold access to my river corridors to cover his debts. Then he used territory he did not own as collateral." Mara could not speak. The car moved through the city, past wet streets and old balconies, and glowing bars full of music. Inside, the silence was soft and terrible. "By the laws of our world," Dante continued, "your family should be gone by morning." Mara looked at him then, fear slicing clean through her. "But they are not." "No." "Why?" Dante's gaze settled on her with the same dark certainty he had carried in the ballroom. "Because of you. Because of you." The words stayed between them as the armored car slipped through the wet streets of New Orleans, quiet and heavy as a secret. Mara looked down at the file in her lap, at the copied signatures, the river maps, the payment trails, and the proof that her father had not only lied to Dante Moretti, but had used Mara's own work as a knife pointed at the wrong throat. The routes she had built to keep the Bellucci family safe had been sold behind her back. The system she had protected with sleepless nights and careful hands had become collateral for Vittorio's debts. It should have made her angry first. Instead, it made her tired. Dante watched her from the other side of the car, his face calm in the passing glow of streetlights, but his eyes were not calm at all. They were sharp and dark, fixed on every small change in her expression. "Your father has enemies coming for him," he said. "He thinks tonight was about securing my protection." It was not. By the time he walked into that ballroom, his territory was already mine. Mara lifted her eyes slowly. "Then why bring me out like that? Why humiliate Bianca? Why make a show of choosing me?" "Because your father needed to learn what he lost." "My father never had me," Mara said, and her voice sounded softer than she wanted it to. "He only had my work." Dante leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That ends tonight." Mara almost laughed, but the sound would have broken in her throat. "You speak as if you are offering freedom, but this car is locked, your men are armed, and you just told me my family could be killed by morning. Forgive me if I do not mistake this for kindness." Something almost like respect moved across Dante's face. "Good. Never mistake power for kindness. Kindness can change its mind. Power keeps its promises. And what promise are you keeping with me?" Dante's gaze lowered for one brief second, not in shame, not in pity, but as if he was choosing the cleanest truth. Protection, use, desire, all three, if you are brave enough to hear them. Mara's breath caught before she could stop it. She turned toward the window, watching the city blur into darker roads where the lights thinned and the air seemed to smell more strongly of river water and moss. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Pretend." Her fingers tightened over the edge of the file. "You want my mind? Fine. You want my roots? Fine. You want the thing I know how to build. Say that. I can survive honesty, but do not sit there in your expensive suit and pretend you want the rest of me just because you think it will make me easier to control." The car went quiet. For the first time since he had entered the Bellefontaine, Dante's control slipped. Not much. Just enough for Mara to see the heat beneath the ice. His jaw tightened. His hand curled slowly against his knee. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, and far more dangerous than before. "I do not desire women based on the taste of weak men." Mara looked back at him. Dante moved closer, slow enough that she could have pulled away, but she did not. "I saw Bianca the moment I entered that room," he said. "I saw the dress, the jewels, the pretty smile trained by a family that thinks beauty is a business plan. I saw every man in that room pretending she was rare because they are too common to know the difference." Mara swallowed. "Then I saw you," he continued, trying to hide beside a column while reading the whole ballroom like a battlefield. Soft, quiet, wounded, and still standing. "You think I chose you because you can move cargo better than your father. That is part of it, but not all of it. I chose you because there was an entire room full of people looking at you, and not one of them saw what was right in front of them." Mara's eyes burned. And what was that? Dante's gaze held hers. A woman strong enough to keep an empire alive, while everyone around her called her weak. The words were too much. They slipped under defenses she had spent years building and touched places she did not let anyone near. Mara looked away first, hating that her hands were shaking, hating even more that part of her wanted to believe him. The Moretti estate appeared beyond a long iron gate outside the city, where the road curved through black trees and the warm night seemed to hold its breath. It had once been a plantation mansion, old and white and beautiful in a way that carried ghosts. Now it was a fortress. Cameras hid under the eaves, guards moved along the balconies, floodlights rested in the grass like sleeping eyes. The front doors opened before the car stopped, and a tall man with silver at his temples stepped forward as Dante led Mara inside. "This is Luca," Dante said, "my captain. If I am not with you, he is the only man you open a locked door for." Luca bowed his head to Mara, not deeply, not dramatically, but with real respect. That unsettled her more than rudeness would have. She was used to being dismissed. Respect felt like a language she had once studied, but never expected to hear spoken to her. The inside of the estate was warmer than she expected. Dark wood, wide staircases, high ceilings, old paintings, fresh flowers placed in rooms that still felt built for war. Dante did not drag her into a bedroom, did not crowd her into a corner, did not use the power he clearly had. He gave her a suite with a locked door, a private bathroom, and a closet already filled with clothes in her size. Not guessed, not insulting, not stretched versions of things meant for smaller women. Real clothes, soft cotton, silk robes, wide waistbands, dresses cut for her body instead of against it. Mara stood in the doorway of the closet for a long time, one hand over her mouth. Dante remained behind her. If anything does not fit, it will be replaced. She turned slightly. When did you do this? Before tonight. You were that sure I would leave with you? No, Dante said. I was that sure your father did not deserve another chance to make you feel unwanted. Mara slept badly, but she slept. In the morning, she found breakfast waiting outside her door, and Dante nowhere in sight. For 3 days, he gave her space. That alone was strange enough to frighten her. Men like him did not seem like they should understand restraint, yet he came and went like a shadow at the edge of her life, checking on her without pressing, asking questions without demanding, making sure she ate without making her feel watched. His possessiveness was quiet, but it was everywhere. In the guards posted at the hall, in the new phone with only trusted numbers saved, in the way Luca spoke to her, as if she had already become someone important. By the 4th day, Mara could no longer ignore the operations room. It sat behind 2 steel doors beneath the east wing of the mansion, filled with screens, maps, radios, route boards, encrypted systems, and live feeds from docks and warehouses across the Gulf. It was a kingdom made of movement. To most people, it would have looked impossible. To Mara, it looked like a song being played slightly out of tune. She noticed the first wrong note before lunch. A warehouse transfer outside Baton Rouge had been marked delayed twice, but the port timestamp showed it cleared on schedule. A manifest out of Mobile had 2 matching container IDs, one legal, one buried under a ghost entry. 3 barges connected to Moretti-controlled storage had changed routes by only 12 miles each, such a small shift that no one looking for theft would notice. But Mara was not looking for theft. She was looking for intention. Dante found her hours later, barefoot in the operations room, her hair loose over one shoulder, 3 screens open in front of her, and a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside her hand. "You found something," he said. Mara did not turn around. "Someone is using your system to move weapons." The room went still behind her. Dante stepped closer. "Whose weapons? I thought they were yours at first, then I thought they were Bellucci leftovers. They are not." She tapped one line on the screen. "They belong to Salvatore Voss." Dante's face changed almost nothing, but somehow the air did. Luca, standing near the door, muttered something under his breath. Mara looked between them. "That name means something." "Old rival," Dante said. "Ambitious, patient, too patient." "He could not have done this alone," Mara said. "The route codes are internal. Someone close to you fed him access." Luca's expression hardened. Dante's did not. That worried Mara more. She kept digging through the night. Dante stayed beside her, silent for most of it, watching as she pulled apart false manifests and followed tiny changes through the ports, like footprints in wet soil. At dawn, the truth appeared so clearly that even Mara wished she could unsee it. Nico Rinaldi, Dante's childhood friend, his lieutenant, a man with access, history, trust, and enough bitterness to sell all 3. For a long moment, Dante only stared at the name on the screen. Mara expected rage. Instead, she saw something worse. Pain locked behind discipline. "I am sorry," she said quietly. Dante's hand rested on the back of her chair. "Do not be sorry for showing me the knife before it reached my back." He left within the hour, dressed in black, surrounded by armed men. Before he went, he stopped at the operations room door and looked back at Mara. "Stay here. Lock the door. Open it only for me or Luca. You think Nico will run? I think Nico wants me angry enough to chase him. Then do not chase him." Dante's eyes softened in that almost invisible way she was beginning to recognize. "I have to." Mara stood. "Dante." He paused. She wanted to say something careful, something useful. Instead, what came out was, "Come back." For a moment, the dangerous head of the Moretti Empire looked at her as if she had handed him something more valuable than territory. Then he crossed the room, took her face gently between his hands, and pressed his mouth to her forehead. Not a kiss of ownership, not a performance, a promise. "I will." Then he was gone. The estate felt different without him, larger, colder. Mara stayed in the operations room with the doors locked and the cameras open across the main screens. She watched the Moretti convoy leave through the outer gates. She watched the guards reset the perimeter. She watched rain begin to bead on the lenses outside. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Mara stared at it, already knowing. When she answered, Nico's voice came through smooth and amused. "You really are as clever as he thinks." Mara's blood went cold. "Nico, I have to admit, Mara, you were faster than expected." Voss said Vittorio kept a little clerk hidden in the back, but he did not say she had teeth. She turned toward the cameras, her pulse steadying as fear sharpened into focus. "Where is Dante?" "Far enough." The first black SUV hit the outer gate hard enough to make the camera shake. Mara stopped breathing. Nico laughed softly. "You see it now, don't you? The weapons were never the prize. They were the noise. Dante is chasing betrayal on one side of the parish, while Voss walks through his front door on the other. And you, sweet Mara, are going to open the kingdom for us." Another SUV followed, then another. Mara hung up. For 1 second, the fear was huge. It filled the room, pressing against her ribs, turning her mouth dry. She was not a fighter. She had no gun in her hand. She had no army beside her. The men coming through Dante's gates had spent their whole lives making people scream. Then Mara looked at the screens, at the roots, at the systems, at the empire Voss thought he was about to steal. And something inside her went very quiet. "No," she whispered. "You do not get to take what I built." She sat down. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. First, she locked every active Moretti route with Dante's route codes, sealing the network so no outsider could move a shipment, payment, or truck without tripping an alarm. Then she froze the live manifests, scrambled the port schedules, and sent automated delay notices to every warehouse in the chain. If Voss captured the estate, he would not inherit a kingdom. He would inherit a map with all the roads erased. Then Mara turned on Voss. For years, while protecting the Bellucci routes, she had studied rival systems in silence. Voss had always been sloppy in one particular way. He trusted fear more than paperwork. His men moved fast, but his accounts left shadows. Mara followed those shadows now, pulling false customs records, offshore payment trails, payroll channels, and warehouse leases hidden under names that looked clean until they touched the wrong port. The outer cameras showed armed men crossing the lawn. Mara kept working. She rerouted 2 active weapons shipments directly into inspection lanes already flagged for federal review. She sent anonymous customs alerts with just enough detail to force action, but not enough to point back to Moretti. She froze Voss payroll accounts through shell company locks, cut his communication relays, and exposed bribery channels to officials who would suddenly become very eager to save themselves. By the time the first shots sounded somewhere upstairs, Salvatore Voss's empire had begun to collapse without him even knowing it. The operations room door shook under a heavy blow. Mara's fingers trembled, but she did not stop. She sent one final encrypted package to Dante, Luca, and every Moretti captain still breathing. Routes, names, accounts, Nico's betrayal, Voss's locations, everything. The door burst open. Salvatore Voss entered like a man who expected applause. He was lean, silver-haired, and dressed in pale grey, with a smile so smooth it looked painted on. Armed men filled the doorway behind him, and beside him stood Bianca. Mara stared at her sister, feeling the blow land somewhere deeper than fear. Bianca's silver beauty was gone tonight, replaced by a tight white dress and red eyes full of anger. She looked at Mara as if all of this, the guns, the betrayal, the invasion, was somehow Mara's fault. "You should have stayed by the wall," Bianca said. Mara stood slowly. "What did you do?" Bianca's mouth trembled before hardening. "What you made me do. Dante was supposed to choose me. Father promised. Everyone knew it. Then you stood there in that awful dress and let him make me look like nothing. I did not ask him to do that." "You never ask," Bianca snapped. "That is what makes it worse. You just stand there being pathetic, and somehow people feel sorry for you." Voss sighed, bored. "Family pain is touching, but I am on a schedule." He looked at Mara. "Unlock the network." Mara held his gaze. "No." One of his men stepped forward. Bianca flinched, but Voss smiled. "You are intelligent. Do not waste that intelligence pretending courage will save you." Mara glanced at the screens behind her. Red warnings bloomed across Voss-linked routes, one after another. Delays, seizures, frozen accounts, broken channels. His smile faded. "What did you do?" he asked. Mara felt a strange calm settle over her. "I destroyed the prize." Voss crossed the room fast and grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her soft skin. "Fix it." She looked down at his hand, then back up at him. "You cannot scare me with being unwanted. I survived that before you walked in." For the first time, Bianca looked unsure. A distant explosion shook the estate, then another. Voss's men shouted. Gunfire cracked from the hall, closer now, sharper and organized. Mara saw Voss understand a second too late. Dante had returned. The fight moved through the estate like thunder. Voss released Mara and reached for his gun, but the lights cut out before he could lift it. Emergency red washed over the room. Luca came through the side entrance first, silent and fast, followed by Moretti men who moved with cold purpose. Bianca screamed and dropped to the floor. Voss tried to run toward the open door, but Dante appeared there, black coat wet from rain, eyes fixed on him with a calm that felt more terrifying than rage. Salvatore Voss stopped. Dante looked past him first, straight to Mara. "Are you hurt?" Her voice shook only a little. "No." Only then did Dante look at Voss. What happened after was fast, controlled, and final. Voss was disarmed. His men were taken. Nico, dragged in later with blood on his collar and defeat in his eyes, could not look at Dante at all. Bianca sobbed on the floor until Mara stepped toward her, and for one foolish second, Mara thought her sister might apologize. Instead, Bianca whispered, "He will get tired of you." Mara looked down at the woman who had spent her whole life shining in every room Mara had been pushed out of. Once, those words would have opened her like a wound. Tonight, they only made her sad. "No," Mara said softly. "You are the one who got tired of pretending cruelty was power." Bianca had no answer. By sunrise, the estate was quiet again. Voss's roots were being seized. His accounts were frozen. Nico's betrayal was finished. Vittorio Bellucci's control over the riverfront had ended before breakfast. The underworld would tell the story in many ways. Some would say Dante Moretti crushed Salvatore Voss with force. Some would say Nico Rinaldi made one mistake too many. Some would say the Bellucci family had been doomed by greed. But the people who understood movement, timing, and survival would know the truth. Mara Bellucci had taken down an empire from behind a locked door. Dante found her on the back balcony as the morning mist lifted over the old trees. She had changed into a soft black dress from the closet he had prepared for her, and her hair moved gently in the damp breeze. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like hiding her body from the morning light. Dante came to stand beside her. "Your father is alive." Mara closed her eyes. "I know. He has no territory, no roots, no protection. The Bellucci name will remain public, for now, but it belongs to you if you want it." She looked at him. "And Bianca? She will live, far from here." Mara nodded slowly. That was more mercy than Bianca would have given her. Dante turned fully toward her. "I told you I wanted your mind, your loyalty, and your body. I should have said something else first." Mara's heart began to beat harder. "What?" "Your choice." The words were quiet. They changed everything. Mara studied him in the soft gray light. This man had pulled her from a ballroom where she had been humiliated. He had shown her ugly truths. He had protected her without caging her, desired her without mocking her, and placed power in her hands as if it belonged there. He was dangerous. He would always be dangerous. But for the first time, danger did not feel like a door closing. It felt like a world opening. "And if I choose to leave?" she asked. Dante's expression tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Then you leave with money, protection, and every root you built under your own name. No one touches you, not your father, not Voss's leftovers, not me." Mara stepped closer, "And if I choose to stay?" His control slipped again, beautifully this time. "Then you stand beside me. Not behind me, not hidden, beside me." Mara looked toward the river in the distance, where morning light touched the water like pale gold. She thought of the girl by the ballroom wall, the daughter told to shrink, the woman who had built kingdoms for men who could not bear to thank her. Then she looked at Dante Moretti and felt the last thread of that old life loosen from her throat. "I will not be your secret," she said. "No. I will not be your clerk. No. I will not be grateful for crumbs." Dante stepped close enough that the warmth of him cut through the morning chill. "Mara, I would burn the table before offering you crumbs." A slow smile touched her mouth, small at first, then stronger. "Then give me the ports." His eyes darkened with pride. "Done. And the river schedules? Yours. And every man who laughed at the idea of me running them answers to me by tonight." Dante's smile was quiet and devastating. "They already do." Mara breathed in, deep and full, and for once the air did not feel borrowed. Dante lifted his hand and touched her cheek, waiting, still giving her that final inch of choice. Mara closed it herself. She rose onto her toes, wrapped her hand around his collar, and kissed him. It was not gentle in the way fairy tales were gentle. It was softer than war, but stronger than surrender. It tasted like rain, fear, relief, and the first sweet breath after years spent underwater. Dante's arms came around her, firm at her waist, holding every curve of her, as if there was nothing about her that needed hiding. Mara leaned into him, not because she had been rescued, but because at last she had been recognized. Months later, the city would whisper her name differently. At charity galas, women who once looked past her would lower their eyes when she entered. Judges would stand when she approached. River captains would wait for her approval before moving cargo through the dark. Vittorio Bellucci would sit alone in a quiet house, watching the empire he claimed to build obey the daughter he had tried to bury. Bianca would become a rumor in another city, still beautiful, still angry, and finally powerless where Mara was concerned. And Dante Moretti, the most feared man in the Gulf South, would never again attend a meeting without Mara beside him. She did not become smaller. She did not become easier. She did not become the polished thing her father wanted, or the delicate prize her sister had been trained to be. Mara Bellucci became something far more dangerous. She became visible. On the balcony of the Moretti estate, with the river waking in the distance and the old world falling quietly behind her, Mara rested her head against Dante's chest and smiled. The unwanted daughter was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the roots, commanded the river, and made the entire underworld understand that a crown does not become less powerful because it was once hidden in the dark.